The winter air bit at Laura's skin as she stood by the frosted window of her suburban home. The snow-covered landscape outside seemed serene, but inside her heart, a storm was brewing. She glanced at her phone, a beacon of temptation and guilt, resting silently on the kitchen counter. It started innocently enough, a message from an old friend. Nate had been her high school sweetheart, a chapter of her life she thought was firmly closed. But his sudden reappearance on her social media feed a few months ago had opened a door she hadn't realized she'd left ajar. "How have you been?" he had typed. "Good," she'd replied, her fingers hesitating before adding, "It's been ages. How are you?" From there, the messages grew in frequency and depth. What began as light-hearted banter soon evolved into late-night confessions. She told Nate things she hadn't even told her husband, mark her frustrations with motherhood, the growing distance in her marriage, and her fear of losing herself in the monotony of daily life. Mark was a good man, dependable and kind, but their relationship had settled into a rhythm that felt more like cohabitation than a partnership. They talked about schedules and bills, not dreams or desires. Laura couldn't remember the last time he'd looked at her the way Nate used to, with unfiltered admiration. One evening, as Laura typed out a particularly vulnerable message to Nate, she was startled by a voice behind her. "Aunt Laura." She spun around, her face burning. Her nephew, Tyler, stood in the doorway, his expression a mix of confusion and discomfort. Tyler, a college student, had been staying with them for a few weeks during his winter break. "Tyler, I didn't hear you come in," she stammered, quickly locking her phone. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said, his tone careful. "But, are you okay?" Laura forced a smile. "Of course. Just catching up with an old friend." Tyler nodded, but the awkwardness lingered. He left the room, and Laura's chest tightened with a mix of shame and fear. Had he seen the messages? Did he suspect what was happening? The days that followed were fraught with tension. Tyler was polite but distant, and Laura couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he let on. Meanwhile, her conversations with Nate became a lifeline, a secret escape from the suffocating guilt she felt at home. One night, Mark suggested they all watch a movie together. As the credits rolled and Mark dozed off on the couch, Tyler turned to Laura. "Aunt Laura," he began, his voice low, "can I ask you something?" Her stomach churned. "Of course. Are you happy?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "You've seemed distracted lately." "I'm just worried about you," he said, his eyes earnest. Tears welled up in Laura's eyes. "It's complicated, Tyler. Sometimes, life doesn't turn out the way you expect, and you find yourself searching for something more." "Does Uncle Mark know?" he asked softly. Laura's breath hitched. "No, and I'm not sure he ever will." The conversation hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. Tyler didn't press further, but his words lingered in Laura's mind long after he'd gone to bed. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between the life she had and the one she yearned for. Over the following weeks, Laura began to pull back from Nate. The messages became shorter, less frequent. She couldn't deny the connection they'd shared, but she also couldn't ignore the damage it was causing to her marriage, her sense of self, and her relationships with those around her. One evening, she found herself sitting across from Mark at the dining table, their children's laughter echoing from the other room. "Mark," she began, her voice trembling, "I think we need to talk." He looked up, concern etched on his face. "What is it?" "About us." about. Everything she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. In that moment, Laura made a choice. To face the cracks in their marriage head-on, to rebuild what had been lost, and to find herself within the life she already had. It wouldn't be easy, and there were no guarantees. But for the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but Laura knew one thing for sure: she was ready to walk it, one step at a time.